Midnight on Earth podcast with your host, Jake Weaver. Engineered by Cedric Swan. Hey everybody, we are back with another episode of Midnight on Earth. I'm your host, Jake Weaver, and we are here to bring you more knowledge, more light, and more love, and more incredible guests. P.D. Newman is here, and we are going to be talking about his most recent book, Tripping the Trail of Ghosts, Psychedelics, and the Afterlife Journey in Native American Mound Cultures. Whoa! We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. We are very similar frequency people, incredible human. We're going to talk to him in just a second, but first, I need you to do something for me. Follow me on Instagram at midnight_on_earth. That is the address. You can follow me there. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you go to get your podcasts, click that button that connects us so you know exactly what's going on. When people come on like P.D. Newman, you get that notification, you know, instantly. Lastly, tell a friend, tell someone that you know that loves these type of podcasts. You know these people, you know their frequency. Bring them here, midnightonearth.com. Okay, so we are about to talk to PD, but first, I have to read his bio. So here we go. P.D. Newman has been immersed in the study and practice of shamanism, alchemy, hermeticism, and theurgy for more than 2 decades. The author of Theurgy, Theory, and Practice and Angels and Vermilion. He lives currently in Tupelo, Mississippi with his wife, Rebecca, and his youngest son, Bacchus, and he's here with us today. Hello, PD.
Hello. Pleasure to be here.
We are here, man. Oh my God. Incredible book.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Look, I knew that there was a history of native cultures around the world using psychedelics. But when people think about these things, usually they focus on South American culture, sometimes Australian Aboriginal cultures, but you're talking about more North American cultures and the natives that were there. It's amazing. They were using these psychedelics as well. So tell me, what was the first bridge? Like, what attracted you to this culture and what they're doing, these cultures?
I've grown up and lived in the South, and Indian mounds, the burial mounds are virtually everywhere. Here in Tupelo, I can go probably 30 minutes in any direction, and I'll end up near a mound site. So they've always been present and fascinated me. Now, what made me dive this deep into the Mississippians in particular?
Yes.
It was really connected to my last book on theurgy. And a theurgy is a ritualized application of Platonic metaphysics. And it's this idea of soul flight and union with, connecting with the gods. And the schematic of this is based on the georeferential model of the cosmos, so that the soul leaves the earth and travels up through the heavens and eventually lands on the Milky Way. Ever since Pythagoras, there's been this idea that souls after death and before incarnation are orbiting on the Milky Way.
Right.
And there are 2 portals that allow the soul to get out of this cave that we're in Plato's view, and onto that Milky Way. Well, I was in Yorkshire giving a lecture at the Tyringham Initiative, which is a phenomenal conference that takes place yearly or every couple of years. But I was there talking with Brian Murarescu. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He wrote The Immortality Key.
I'm familiar with the book, but the name escaped me.
Well, he has a background in classics, so I'm telling him about theurgy because the book is about to come out at that time, and describing to him that schematic I just told you about. Well, next to us, about 2 feet away, were Graham Hancock and Dennis McKenna, and they were having a conversation. And Graham overheard what I was telling Brian, and he says, "Oh, you're talking about the Path of Souls." And I said, "No, I've never heard of that. What's that?" And he said, "Well, it's exactly what you're describing, only it was among the Native Americans in North America." And I said, "You got to be shitting me. I've never heard of that." So I get on my phone and I look up a book called Path of Souls, which was written by Gregory Little, who turned out to live in Memphis. So we quickly became good friends. But when I got back home, that book was waiting on me. And it was like water for my soul. I was just so enthralled with this tradition, these multiple traditions, but this model of soul ascent and how it can be so virtually identical to the Greek model without any known communication among the two cultures. So it just really lit me up, turned me on. And the more I was reading the seminal texts from the archaeologists, the anthropologists that are studying these cultures, the more it became evident that central to what they were doing were psychedelics, was a very sophisticated application of psychedelics designed to propel the soul of the individual into these regions that he could be expected to encounter when he actually dies. Right. So they were using them in conjunction with the mound sites as a virtual training ground for what the soul is going to have to remember to do, have to be comfortable with doing when that time actually comes and they pass away.
Isn't that interesting? Literally all over the world, the same motif, and then also this very deep significance in preparation for death. You think about the Egyptian culture and how important it was, but all over the world, you have humans, because we're just all one human family. We're humans. There's like archetypal behaviors, and we're preparing for death. Something inside of us knows that this life in this dimension is this very brief transitory experience. And the next thing perhaps is even more profound. So they train themselves with psychedelics, with these powerful psychedelics and other ritualistic behaviors and techniques to train for that experience. So they're not, freaked out? Do they get lost? What happens if they don't have training?
Well, not everyone got this training. This was considered secret knowledge into which you had to be initiated. So it was very much an elite kind of a thing. We might compare it to the way Masonry works. You know, Masonry has its own teachings that not everyone has access to because not everyone is a Mason. Right. And we see something similar in ancient Egypt. It wasn't just the Greeks that had this model. Right. When we look at the Pyramid of Unas, what became known as the pyramid texts, we have a description of the same thing with the ascent of the soul going through a portal in the sky that's located in the same exact constellation as it is in the Native American model, and then gets out on the Milky Way. But in that case, it was reserved for the pharaohs. So it's not like everyone got to do this. Only the pharaoh did. Now, as time went on, it started to include what we might call noblemen. They were given an opportunity to learn this. But once the texts were copied from Unis's pyramid, then they started being painted on the inside of coffins. And that's what became known as the coffin texts. And anyone who could afford one of these coffins could have access to this wisdom. And then fast forward a little bit further, where papyrus becomes a common thing that virtually anyone can have. And we start seeing the books of the dead in Egypt emerging. So anyone who can afford the book can have this wisdom and can exploit the secrets contained in them. So to answer your question, what happens to those who didn't have this knowledge? Well, that changes with the tribe. The Mississippians is an umbrella term for a number of different tribes that existed in and around the Mississippi River. So different tribes had different ideas about the fate of the soul upon death.
But there was some correlations with these tribes. And also, I just want to back you up a little bit. Tell me about the mound culture. Is this Mississippian ideological interaction sphere, as you call it in your book, is this the mound culture of even ancient times or perhaps antediluvian?
So Mississippian proper begins around 1000 AD. Now, there's some evidence that it might be a few centuries earlier, maybe as early as 800. And there's going to be some publications coming out soon that is going to push that date back even further. But I don't want to step on any toes. So I won't go into exactly what they have to say. But the cultures that preceded the Mississippians were the Hopewell and Adena cultures. And even further back before that were the Poverty Point cultures. But they have their own sets of iconography. Now, the ones that are related to the Mississippians they're virtually universal among them. And they all seem to have to do with death. And the reason for that is they pertain to this afterlife journey. But it was so reminiscent of notions of death that the original name given to these people that adhered to these icons was the death cult, the Great Southern Death Cult, which I think would be a great band name for a doom metal band, the Southern Death Cult. But as they started to learn more, the archaeologists, anthropologists studying this started to learn more about it, and also tried to be a little bit more conscientious in regard to how the descendants of those natives might perceive such a title. Different names for it started being thrown around. Now, the final name of this group of people, this group of tribes that are interacting, became the Mississippian Iconography Interaction Sphere, because they're all manipulating these symbols, sometimes in their own way, but virtually for the same purposes.
But were they related to the giants, some of the older skeletons that were found?
There are absolutely giants involved, and that makes some folks they immediately turn off when they hear something like that, because you know what I mean?
They don't realize that what we're talking about is just oversized skeletons, 10, 12 feet tall. We're not talking about 1,000 feet tall people. We're talking just abnormally sized humans. If you saw a 15-foot tall person, you would say that person's a giant.
Right. And when you look at the early literature, the early reports that emerged from the excavations done at these sites, they almost always include a reference to a skeleton that is between 7 and 9 feet tall.
Right.
And they're usually placed at the very base of these mounds. What's interesting is all of those skeletons were collected up and have been placed in a box in the Smithsonian, and no one is allowed to view them. They're completely off limits. There's no pass you can buy that would get you access to them. Moreover, in the reissues of those same research documents, all of the references to the heights of these skeletons
Totally removed.
have been scrubbed, taken away.
What are they so afraid of? I mean, what is the big deal if there was an earlier iteration of human that was taller? Perhaps they were remnants of an earlier iteration of humanity where the gravity wasn't as intense, so the body grew taller. Why is that such a big deal?
I think it probably has to do with theological repercussions.
Always.
And the idea, just like you said, antediluvian, giants roamed the earth. I think that they don't even want to have to answer questions like that. So they just brush it aside. But to do so keeps us from even approaching a solution as to why they were fascinated with them. Who were these people? What function did they serve? Right. You know, was it simply a fascination with the extremes of stature, dwarves and giants, kind of like with Rudolph II in Prague? You know, he was known to collect giants and dwarves, and they just hung out around his empire, you know. So there is precedent for kind of just a fascination with the extremes. Was it something like that, or were these people of a specific bloodline that was considered sacred and produced abnormally tall individuals? We don't know, but with the stuff just being scrubbed and brushed aside and placed off limits, we'll never know.
Absolutely. I mean, of course, the book Forbidden Archaeology, the classic Michael Cremo, he was a guest on my show way back. He's outlined many different anomalies throughout archaeology, but just focusing on this area, there are so many things that indicate that there have been cultures in North America dating back perhaps 100,000 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And the book I mentioned earlier that really turned me on to the whole Path of Souls phenomenon by Gregory Little, who is someone that I think you would love to have on your show. He's a brilliant guy. But part of the focus of his book was these giants, and he reproduces a lot of the first editions that still retained those references, and talks at length about, you know, the possibilities of what could be going on.
So what is happening now, though, with this information? I mean, people are evolving all of this mystery school information that we're talking about that was considered secret or hidden or for elites is now readily available on our internet for free within a millisecond.
That's right.
What's going on with humanity where we were at this point in that time in North America where we were living with nature, preparing for death, using our shamanic tools to travel the cosmos. And now we're in this modern world where all of that information is present and readily available. There's more people on the planet than ever for this cycle. And something's brewing, something's happening. What is the narrative there that connects then and now?
You know, that's a good question. We talk about the information age and how information, anything we could want to know virtually is at our fingertips. And as you said, in a millisecond. Yeah. Well, having all of that information, overwhelming us with information, reduces the potential for genuine wisdom to emerge. And I think that's a big difference between the way we operate today and the way they operated, with this being a secret wisdom. Back in those days, genuine wisdom had value. It had power. Yeah, but today you can take it or leave it. You can say, "Oh, I heard that once. I don't remember where." Back then, they would have known exactly where they heard it, under what circumstances, and that itself would have became a new story narrative that would bloom into myth, that would teach others how to live. And that's the real beauty of that way of keeping information versus what we do. There's no narrative for us. It's just information. But with narrative, we have the capacity to grow, to become the wisdom that we're encountering. With no narrative, there's no story. It's incomplete. It's just a mess, but the way they approached it, and the way many still do, secret societies are a great example. They get a lot of flack because there's this new age notion that, well, if there's information that could help people, why would you keep it secret? And why not just tell everyone? They don't understand the sanctity of some wisdoms, some knowledge. And there's also the issue of a man's right to ignorance. It's not our place to just blow somebody's mind by handing them a piece of information that shatters their worldview. There's a kind of a meanness in that. It's not necessarily an act of love. So preserving wisdom and setting it apart in a big way is how we maintain its importance and its relevance to our lives, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was beautiful. But now in this day and age, people that are seekers can find it, and all of the information is readily available. Do you think that is helping humanity's evolution for the seeker to be able to have access to everything?
In a way, but you're familiar with gnosis.
Of course, yes.
And gnosis, it means wisdom, but it's a particular kind of wisdom because it's an ineffable wisdom. And those are big words that make it sound a lot more complicated than it is. What we're really saying is, if you don't have it within yourself already, you might not have made it concrete by figuring out a way to articulate it clearly. But if you have a budding intuition in you, then encountering certain informations will automatically click for you. You're encountering something you already know, but didn't know how to say. So you could have every piece of information in the world available to you, but without the right eyes to see it, it's invisible. It might as well not be there.
Right. But there's something about it that resonates with the person that they attracted to. They might not be ready for it yet, but it does influence their frequency just enough to where it might, if they choose with free will, to grow.
If they're perceptive enough, those synchronicities, they happen.
Absolutely.
And it might be tomorrow or a week or a month or a year later, but something will take place and they'll say, wait a minute, I know this, and ultimately they'll go back to, that's what he meant. It's like the way Homer, the joke that you don't get until you're on the way home.
Well, it's said that when you read a book for the second time, you read it differently because you have changed from the information from reading it the first time, and you notice different things. There's a frequency shift there. And that's really what's happening with humanity, but it stems back to these cultures that were there on Earth, preserving these understandings through ritual, through using these very powerful psychedelic substances. Now, what we'll call the MIIS or the MIS, how do you pronounce that when you discuss that with people? Do you say MIS or MIIS?
To be honest, I don't say it. I just, the sphere is how I talk about it with the
cultural sphere
associates. Yeah. If I say the interaction sphere, they know what I'm talking about. But MIS,
it doesn't really hit, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Well, that sphere of humanity, they were using substances that were not necessarily traditional. They came up with their own version of ayahuasca, which you were calling Missihuasca. Tell us about that, and how does it relate and differ from ayahuasca, which most people understand now?
So ayahuasca is limited to South America.
Right.
There's never been an inkling of suspicion that anyone in North America was consuming ayahuasca. The plants don't grow here. Even though there was a very sophisticated trade route happening between all of the Americas, it's just never been surmised that they were using ayahuasca, and they weren't. But they were using something that is analogous to ayahuasca. Now, ayahuasca requires two plants to work as ayahuasca. One is the N,N-dimethyltryptamine containing plant, which in South America is generally Psychotria viridis. The other is Banisteriopsis caapi, which is the source of the monoamine oxidase inhibitor. That inhibitor is what allows the DMT to be active orally once it's consumed.
Right, because if you just consume the first part, it wouldn't do anything.
In most cases. Now, there are some cases where it does.
Oh.
But under normal circumstances, yes, that's right. So with the Mississippians, the first question is, where were they getting their DMT, right? Well, all throughout the stories, the myths, especially in the Cherokee tribe, they talk about the honey locust tree, which is a tree that grows all around southeastern United States. And it's related to mimosa, and it's related to acacia. In fact, it was previously classified as Acacia americana. Now it's been reclassified as Gladitsia triacanthos, but that acan and acanthos is the same root as acacia. Acanthus means thorned. Acacia means thorned. It's named after its most defining characteristic, which are these gnarly thorns. And in the case of honey locust, they are clusters that each individual thorn can be up to 12 inches long. I mean, and they are sharp as all get out. And it's very difficult to work with for that reason. But there are different stories. A good example is the gambler myth that James Mooney preserved from the Cherokee. Right. And it's about this boy that he knows he's the son of the highest deity, the chief god, basically. I don't like to say god because it's a loaded term, but the chief spirit. And he goes to him and he says, I'm your son. And he says, well, you'll have to prove it. And this very likely served as a charter for actual rites of passage for boys passing into manhood, these 3 trials. So the first trial, he tells them to go sit down on this blanket that's over in to the side of his little hut. And he sits down and nothing happens. Well, this is the first indication that he may be his son, because underneath the blanket are hundreds of honey locust thorns, all sticking up, poking up.
Okay.
Now, the next trial is that he has to play the Cherokee ball game against his other sons, his known sons. Well, the Cherokee ball game is we think about sports as being recreational, but for them, it's sacred. It was cosmological what they were doing in the game.
Right. Everything was integrated. They didn't separate spirituality. Life was spiritual. It was all intertwined.
There was no secular. That's something we've invented. But for them, everything is sacred, and some things even more sacred. And this game would be one of those. And so he has to go play this ball game. Well, the sticks for the game, they only use sticks from a honey locust that's been struck by lightning. That makes it even more sacred. Now, so they've got these sticks taken from the honey locust, the same source of the thorns he sat on previously. And in the ball game, Mooney notes that the natives would take the roots of the tree and chew on them, and then spit the juice out and rub it all over their bodies. That's all he says about it, but automatically my ears were poking up, and you'll see why in a moment. So he succeeds, passes the second trial, and the third trial, he is told to climb into a giant pot that's filled with boiling water, and in it are honey locust roots, and he's being boiled with the roots. So there's an indication that they're boiling these roots. Well, many anthropologists, ethnographers, archaeologists have read these myths because they're very important in the literature, but none of them realized that the honey locust is a very potent source of DMT. And they didn't realize it because, to my knowledge, it's only recognized in a single source. And that's a book called Some Simple Tryptamines by Keeper of the Trout and Friends, a very famous underground psychedelic book. So that was the first indication that it served a number of purposes and was sacred and was probably being consumed. Now, when they're spitting the juices out, so DMT is not active just by soaking into the oral mucosa. So chewing the leaves wouldn't have done anything. And without an MAOI, swallowing those juices wouldn't either. But they tell us they're spitting them out and rubbing it on the body. Well, DMT is absorbable transdermally. You can put it on your body and it'll soak in and you'll get the effect. So that's one way they're getting it.
Wow.
Now, to explain the next leap in logic here, and before I do, there are even what are called gorgets or gorgets, these shell medallions that they carve and would wear around their neck, and headdresses that feature different imagery from these stories. And one of them shows the boy in a pot surrounded by roots boiling in this pot. Archaeologists have never known what this was a picture of. In fact, they were so confused by the curly, squiggly lines in the pot with the boy that they call them spaghetti gorgets, because they're basically saying, I don't know what it is, but it looks like spaghetti.
It's spaghetti.
But it's those roots. Now, and So that's important before we make this next leap.
Sure,
Now,
sure.
it's well known that the Mississippians were making something called black drink, also known as casina.
Right.
And it was very widespread, even though the plant it's made from, which is Ilex vomitoria, it's the weeping yaupon holly, it only grows in a very slim portion of the southern United States.
And isn't that the only source of caffeine in North America, right? During that time, I learned that from your book. That's incredible.
The only native source of caffeine. It's a close cousin of yerba mate. And before coffee was being imported here, even the early colonists knew of the caffeine content, and it was what they drank instead of coffee. And when coffee came, they preferred their yaupon. It took what am I trying to say? Advertising, marketing.
Marketing. There we go.
Yeah, yes, it took some heavy marketing to convince them that only poor people drank yaupon holly, that coffee is what you want. That's sophisticated. And with that, the usage fell out. But now, so the natives, they would brew it up to such a consistency, a concentration, that it became black and syrupy, and that's where it gets its name, black drink. And the colonists would view them drinking it. They would drink it out of these giant shells. They're lightning whelk shells, and they're huge. So it's not like a little teacup. These things are enormous and would hold a ton of liquid. And so they drink it, and they'd be observed drinking it and vomiting, and then drinking it again, which led botanists to give it the name Ilex vomitoria, the ilex that makes you vomit. So I have these things growing everywhere. On my property out here, I own 2.9 acres, just growing wild. My son and I, we have found 6 wild yaupons just out here around the pond, and we take the berries and plant them. So now we have tons, and we take care of them. We formed a relationship with them. But I thought, I'm going to put it to the test, because it doesn't make sense that it would be an emetic, that it would make you vomit, if the early colonists were also drinking it and preferred it at one point to coffee.
Right.
So I roasted the leaves the way they would do, and then I boiled them up, and I'd make the tea at increasing concentrations, drinking more and more and more. And I got to where I drank an entire gallon in one setting. And I had the caffeine jitters for sure, but at no point did I vomit. So I thought, what are the chances that they're adding something else to it, that this is just a base, so to speak, and that depending on the context, something else might be added to it.
Which is common for traditional native cultures who use things like teas and coffees as a base for their medicine.
That's right. And what made me think in that direction was the common addition of datura and brugmansia to ayahuasca in South America in certain settings. They call it toé. So I thought, what if there was something else they're putting in it that would make you vomit? And I already had in the back of my mind this honey locust DMT connection, because ayahuasca is always associated with vomiting. And in some regions, it's even known as la purga, the purge, So I got my hands on a book by Sean Rafferty. The title is Native American Intoxicants, I think. And I looked at the chapter on black drink, and sure enough, he says that depending on the context, different substances were added that would give it different effects. So I started looking deeper into this. And that led me to looking at analyses of botanical assemblages recovered from mound sites, which is basically all of the plant matter they found in and around the mounds. Over and over, they're psychoactives. They're of course, there's the yaupon, but they're also finding datura. They're finding black nightshade. They're finding morning glory seeds, which morning glory seeds contain LSA, a close cousin to LSD, very visionary substance. And they're also finding passion flower there. Now, passion flower is something I had already developed a relationship with here because of its content of MAOI. The same thing that's in the second plant in ayahuasca. It has a large amount of harmine in it. So I'm thinking, well, there's a clear instance of an MAOI present alongside this honey locust with the DMT. I said, what are the chances that they could be combining them? You know, and then I started researching the tobacco use. Tobacco is something I had never used. I grew up asthmatic, never smoked, so I had no idea what tobacco was like. And I thought, if I'm going to do this, treat tobacco in the book faithfully and do it justice, I need to have some experience with it. And I find out that what they were using was Nicotiana rustica, which is about 3 to 9 times more potent than Nicotiana tabacum, commercial tobacco. And it also contains monoamine oxidase inhibitors in it.
Oh my God.
So I thought, well, there's two plants that are MAOIs. And then I started looking more into just what I could find about black drink. And lo and behold, Ilex vomitoria has trace amounts of monoamine oxidase inhibitors in it. So there's 3 plants that they have a close relationship with. And if any of these could have been combined with the honey locust, which we already know they were boiling it up from the stories. They're boiling the roots already. They just tell the boy to get in the pot with them, but those roots are already boiling.
Right. That's incredible.
So it becomes like more and more probable that this is happening. And remember, I said what started me on this, this additive trail was the addition of datura and brugmansia to ayahuasca down in South America. Well, I found this great study where at Spiro is a huge mound complex in Oklahoma, one of the most important. And one of the mounds is hollow inside, and inside is a temple.
Right.
They had tree trunks set up to hold it open. And inside there were thousands and thousands of these shell cups that they would drink the black drink from. And thank God those researchers said, let's do a residue analysis and see what exactly they were drinking. And they, something like 3/4 of a huge number of them tested positive for datura. Now, the alkaloids, DMT and monoamine oxidase inhibitor, those aren't as stable as coffee, cocoa, datura. Those alkaloids are stable. They'll stick around for a long time. So it's doubtful that we would be able to find clear evidence of DMT still in one of those cups. But we did find datura, which is a clear indication that strong psychoactives are being added to the black drink under certain circumstances. So this is what led to what I call my Missihuasca hypothesis. And if it's just a hypothesis, further research is going to have to take place if we're ever going to get it into the realm of theory, but
it's there. I mean, the information's there. This is absolutely blowing my mind because clearly, it doesn't take a big leap to say that they combined these things in that way.
Right.
Like you said, they had this relationship with these plants. Of course they did that. Have you tried it yourself? Have you just gone ahead and thrown those things together in that way to see what would happen?
Do you think I'm crazy? Of course I tried. Of course I tried it.
Yes, I hope so. And what was your experience? Do you feel like it was similar to ayahuasca? Did you feel that natural DMT activation?
Yeah, absolutely. But anytime I'm working with a new substance that there's not a lot of research out there, I take it slow. Now with the passion flower, I have a long history of use with that going back a decade. So I wasn't nervous about that. The honey locust is what I was nervous about because the natives were pretty tough. They were using some compounds like mescal beans, that one bean can kill you. It has cysteine in it. So they were prepared to literally take themselves to the brink of death with quite literally toxic, neurotoxic compounds. I'm not interested in doing that. So I don't know what all is in honey locust. There are even some acacia out there. There are some 1,000 species. I think almost 800 of them have DMT in them.
Right.
But then about a third of those have other toxic compounds that go along with it, which means you need to have some knowledge of chemistry and how to get it out if you're going to use it. So my use of the honey locust has been small and slow, but there was no doubt that there was clear DMT activity. The most I took so far was 10 grams of the root bark itself. And I combined that with 25 grams of passion flower. And I got, number one, very nauseous, more nauseous than I'm used to with ayahuasca.
Wow.
But that being said, number two, I was tripping balls for a good 4 hours.
Wow.
So it's absolutely active. Now, I don't recommend.
No, we're not recommending any of this at all. This is just, we're reporting on this information.
Right. As long as we're reporting. Because everybody listening, I don't know what else could be in there. Right. And some stuff is dangerous. You don't want to mess with it. So leave it to the geeks like me to test it. And I promise I'll report back. I'll publish a full study of my experience with it and the pros, the cons. I'll tell you everything.
Oh, that's fascinating.
If you are going to try it, just be careful. Don't be stupid.
This is fascinating. It's mind-blowing. This is a new realm of psychedelics that have not been explored or even talked about. To be completely honest, this is the first time I'm hearing about this, reading your book and then talking to you. No one's talked about this, especially in this way. And in that experience that you had, or the experiences, did you interact with a plant spirit in the same way people talk about interacting with Mother Aya or the ayahuasca plant spirit?
I always, when it comes to ayahuasca, mushrooms or mescaline, those three, and Salvia divinorum is another one. Those four, there's always somebody in the room.
Right.
There's always somebody there that is talking to you, forming dialogue. Oftentimes with salvia, I never see her, and it's always a her, and she's always right behind my shoulder, but I know she's there. And I get the impression that I'm like a third grader and she's my teacher. They all have specific personalities, and that absolutely took place with these experiments. I've encountered the serpent. They both revere and fear a great serpent, a feathered serpent, and
Right.
not to be confused with Quetzalcoatl, because it's not the same. Quetzalcoatl was Central American, and it was connected to the planet Venus. For the natives, their great serpent, the Native Americans in the Southeast here, the great serpent was a feathered serpent, but it's the constellation Scorpio. So even just from an astrological perspective,
It's totally different.
Vastly different. Scorpio is sexual, it's got that going for it in terms of Venus energy, but it's very different, very much more combative, sometimes dark. But I did interact with a serpent entity during that experience.
Wow. But nothing that you could ascribe to the spirit of that in itself.
Well, I that's the thing. We don't have enough experience with it to know what the spirit is.
Right. That's a good point, because ayahuasca, of course, is a blend of various things. It activates Mother Aya. We don't even know who we're calling on the phone yet.
That's right. We think about the drugs in them. They both have the same drug, but you and I have the same blood. Right. But that don't mean we're the same person.
Right.
The plants are their own entities. They have their own environment that produces them. So I don't think that we're going to run into Mother Aya on Missihuasca.
Right. It's going to be something else, but we have not discovered it yet.
Right. We need a lot more research.
Absolutely. But when you think about DMT, everyone mostly that studies these things or is interested in this type of information knows that it's in our brain. It's in all forms of biology throughout life on Earth. And it seems to be the circuit or the pathway to interact with extra dimensional beings, to connect with source, to go to other dimensions after your physical body dies. Mm-hmm. What is the purpose of using it shamanically? So we understand, we can train, sure, to go to these other dimensions, but how does that help us as humans? How does that bring us together more? What do you think the deeper purpose of that knowledge is?
That's a good question. And I think it's such a versatile compound and such a versatile spirit that I think the answer to that question can change with the way you approach it. If your concern is wisdom of the afterlife, I think it can give you that. If your concern is learning higher mathematics, I think it can give you that. Just consider the complex animated morphing geometry that we're shown that transcends simple three-dimensional space. If you haven't taken a good dose of tryptamine, you probably don't know what I'm talking about for those listening. But one of the effects of these substances is to expose us to the most beautiful, complex, animated, moving geometry you've ever encountered. Now, if we were to try and sit down and put that on paper, like fractal mathematics, that kind of thing, it would take a super genius. But we're doing it unconsciously. And the materialists would have us believe that our brains are producing this, that we're not really seeing something that's out there or even something that's in here, but that our brain is doing it. Now, I don't think, even if that's true, I don't think it makes it any less absolutely amazing. But it's giving us free of charge the end result of what would take mathematicians decades to even be able to explain what it is we're looking at. So I think the answer would change with what the question was. And you got to think about, like with harming in the early days of this research, harming wasn't called harming. It was called telepathy, because the belief was that it caused telepathy among all the members of the tribe that were taking it together. And Risha, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Risha Dolmatov, wrote several books on his experience with ayahuasqueros and ayahuasca tribes in South America. But he would watch them and how none of them would make eye contact. They were all kind of, it was them and the world. But the movements were all in unison, so tight, and they all moved as one thing, like a flock of birds. You watch a flock of birds, and they one movement here, and everybody responds. Everybody knows, and that's the same kind of thing that they were observing among the natives taking ayahuasca in the early days. And ayahuasca means vine of the souls, rope of the dead. So technically, it's talking about the Banisteriopsis copy vine. That's the vine. That doesn't have DMT in it. That has the monoamine oxidase inhibitor, the harmine, in it. And some tribes don't even add the DMT to it. They just drink a concoction of the Banisteriopsis copy. So that led them to think this is the stuff that's important, and it's causing what appears to be telepathic communication among this close-knit group. So to answer your question there, what can it be doing for us as a people and for our relationships to each other? It can break down barriers between, it can remove that illusion of separation between us, not by causing us to zero in on the other person. Remember, Rochelle Dolmatov says they weren't even making eye contact. Most of them are looking at the ground. But simply through being aware of us and our relationship to the earth, we automatically say yes to the person next to us, to the experience coming tomorrow. We open ourselves up and say yes. And I think if we're going to talk about it in a broad sense of what can it do for all people, it can make us say yes and not turn our backs on what is the greatest gift ever imaginable. Just being on this planet, breathing this air, feeling this sunshine, all of the plant life, the animal life, you and me sitting here like this. We pass it off as something so simple, but this is the mystery.
This is it right now. I know. You and me,
like doing this. If we could explain this, everything would just go away. But this is the miracle. And I think that's what it has the power to do, to make us say yes to the miracle.
Absolutely. And again, it's expanding our awareness so we're able to process more information. And that other information is that quantum awareness that we're all one. It's all love. It all comes from source. And that illusion, the matrix that we've created, this human created matrix that has a purpose, but we created it. it dissolves, it goes away, and you remember, oh my God, that's right, it was an illusion. And this divine reality, this is the actual reality. And by the way, we're all one. But here's the thing, so many people will throw away the matrix. What we have to do is now reprogram the third dimensional reality, aka the matrix, the human created reality, to include all of this new information that's coming from these dimensions, that's coming from source, that's coming from shamans going to these places and getting that information for us. Right. It's time to integrate that.
It's here already.
Right.
It's not reprogramming this. It's reprogramming the way we will allow ourselves to interface with it. I mean, this is it. The gods are right here with us. You know, I love the ancient Egyptian model where, you know, they will depict their gods with animal heads because their gods have a special affinity with these animals. So when they looked out, the god Thoth, he has the ibis head.
Right.
When an Egyptian looked out and saw an ibis on the Nile, they didn't think, oh, that reminds me of Thoth, of Tahuti. That's a sign that I should be thinking of Tahuti. When they looked out and saw that ibis, they were seeing Thoth.
Right.
The god is here. The gods are here. And that's what I think, if there's going to be a reprogramming taking place, and I like that language that you use there, I think it would be that this is the miracle. The matrix, Maya, you know, it is the illusion, but it's an illusion worth relishing.
Yes.
So long as we don't build the walls, so long as we don't focus on what the glass half empty, you know, so much of life, especially in the way we've managed to organize it today, is haves and have-nots. And you know, I'm not rich, but I've never gone a day where, if I'm going to be totally frank and honest, my needs weren't met, where I felt any real sense of despair or disparage. The matrix itself is like a mother cradling us.
Yes.
And if we aren't here, we won't have experience. We can't. That's why we do this. When you think about the one, you know, we're all one. We're all connected, and there's a certain state of consciousness where you can perceive that directly. But a true state of oneness is a state of noneness, of no thingness, because it's not like it's in a room. The one isn't in a room. There is no room. Everything is it. So there's no frame of reference for anything. There's no knowledge. Think about that. No self-knowledge. Knowledge implies duality. There's the knower and there's the known, and there's the knowledge between the two. A great Christian saint, John Scotus Erugena, was talking about the omniscience of God, you know, that God knows all. And he says, no, he doesn't. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know what he is or if he is, you know, and that's not to say that God is stupid. It's to say that whatever knowledge is, it's the province of man. Right. So we can't, to be in that state of oneness all the time is literally to not be.
Right.
That's why the matrix, why Maya is a blessing, so that I can learn who I am, what I am through my illusion of not being you.
Right.
I can see myself in you and vice versa.
And perhaps as we gain that awareness of that oneness, perhaps there's a role for humanity. Perhaps we can have Earth be like a blank canvas where we can change it. We can come together and create the best place
knowledge
possible.
Of the one inform our behavior here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And 100%. Then we can change this place. We can make this place heaven on earth where no matter where a human being manifests, they're going to have an incredible experience. Not to say they're not going to have like emotional stuff, you know, we're humans, but we have the technology. We know how to utilize manifestation. The inspiration will show up. We can make Earth amazing.
That
right. Could be, I could say, that could be part of our role.
I think that's probably right, and I do think that things like DMT are here for that kind of grand purpose.
Yes, absolutely. So many people think that the mass awakening, as we close our interview here, so many people think that the mass awakening of humanity will be some sort of simultaneous DMT release via a solar flare or something that will activate us and raise our frequency to a higher octave together. What do you think about that?
To be 100% honest.
Yes, please.
I have no idea.
Me neither. I just throw this stuff out there.
I have no idea. I love the concept. It is something that is worth hoping for. But I don't think it's going to be that easy. I don't think, what I mean is,
it's not going to be like a light switch where somebody flips the switch into.
Not that we've not been gracious enough, been aware enough to deserve the grace of something external coming in and doing it for us. A solar flare burst and all of a sudden we all get the benefit. I think it's going to take a little bit more elbow grease.
I agree with that one.
But I do love.
Well, it's all conjecture, you know, there's so many different potential realities, but ultimately the only thing that really matters is service, action, taking action. You get all of this information, whether you're a shaman, whether you're a novice, however you show up, you get this information. It can blow your mind. It can change your reality. It can show you the multiverse. And all of that is fantastic. But none of it really matters unless you take action in some way. And that could show up as much as personal development, being the best that you can be personally every day. But you have to take some sort of action.
Yeah, like Nietzsche hit the nail on the head with "Thus spake Zarathustra." A hermit on a mountaintop is useless to everyone.
Right.
He serves no purpose except for himself on that mountain. You got to come down the mountain. And I love that line in Zarathustra. Thus began the going down from the mountain. And then you get back in the marketplace and the anxiety and the blood pressure starts coming up. And that's when the vision has to be implemented to inform the way we act in those moments. And that is, I believe, a form of service, even if a light one.
Yes.
But you're right. Service is what it's all about. If everyone could get into that mode of service, mainly because it gets us out of our way. We're the thing in our way.
Right.
Nothing else is it. We're in our own way, and service alleviates that.
Yes, absolutely.
You hit the nail on the head.
Well, it's the most important thing because you're here for 5 minutes as a human being. You have to contribute something. Some people feel like they don't have to, but those that feel compelled feel like they have to contribute something in some way before they exit to make this place amazing. Because when you truly develop a genuine love for all humanity, then you want to nurture that. You want to take care of that. And then when you understand it's all infinite and it's all made out of that one thing, then you know that that is with you when you're making these decisions, when you're making these leaps of growth, when you're taking action to make the world a better place. You know that you have divinity right behind you, and there's nothing more powerful than that.
And you're certainly doing your part, Jake.
Well, so are you. I mean, your books are amazing. And I do want to tell people about the book, Tripping the Trail of Ghosts, an incredible book that really we just barely touched on. We touched on a lot of it, but there's so much more. So get the book and you can find out all about that. He is online. Just search P.D. Newman and you will find him. He has other books as well, which are out there. The Psychedelic Secret of Freemasonry, an incredible book. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here. It's been an incredible episode. Is there anything else you want to leave our audience with before we go?
You know, I think we have probably given them plenty to chew on.
Oh, yes.
At this point, but let's think about in the future. We'll do another interview and we'll pick up where we left off.
Absolutely. We definitely have to have you back on the show. And the other books, Theurgy, Theory and Practice, Angels in Vermilion, those are also available. Thank you so much for being here, PD. Please hold through the outro music. And everyone else, that was a riveting episode. I was absolutely engrossed. Everything he said was nectar. Take the deep dive on everything that we talked about. Get this book, and we will see you next week. Midnight on Earth.
Thank you, Jake.
Thank you.